Who doesn't love a bargain? Probably nobody. At least nobody in their right mind. Lenses tend to be expensive optical pieces of equipment that we buy for our cameras. Finding a bargain is often one of those incredible experiences where you think, yay, I've got something that's amazing. And then you discover down the road that actually there's no such thing as a free lunch, and actually it's a piece of rubbish. Throw in probably one of the cheapest lenses available, certainly what I think is the cheapest real lens available at the moment, the TTArtisan 25mm f2. I've always been a fan for quirky lenses, and this is probably one of those, if you want to call it a quirky lens. To put some context into this particular review, I tend to shoot commercially on Nikon cameras, and I have Fujifilm cameras for my funsies. I use my Fujifilm when I'm wanting to do street photography and I'm traveling light and I need something that's small and svelte. It's also why I don't have one of the newest Fujifilms. I'm with an X-T3 and occasionally an X-T2 camera, and I also still keep my old X-T1. So I'm not going to spend a bomb on lenses when I'm actually looking to basically just enjoy my camera with the Fujifilm camera. The money tends to go into my commercial equipment, which is, at the moment, Nikon's. And I found myself in the market needing something like a pancake lens. Now, one of my favorite lenses, and anybody who's watched my videos before knows, one of my favorite lenses is this Voigtlander 40mm f2. It's an F mount, so Nikon F mount, all metal lens, and I think it's great. It's a pancake lens, it's super light, it's nice and sharp, and it's just fantastic when you're out doing street photography or landscape photography. I love this little lens. So I was looking to replicate that in the Fujifilm mount, and the TTArtisan kept on coming up. And then you see the price, and you think, oh my hat, that's cheap. So at the moment in the States, you can find it on special for around $55. It sometimes goes up to around $69. In Europe as well, it's got a maximum price of around 69 euros. And in South Africa, you can pick it up for 1,495 rand. So in terms of value for money, this lens is cheaper than most second-hand lenses. So what are you getting when you actually plump up the cash and you buy this little pancake lens? I'm going to separate this video into basically what you're getting with this little lens, the good, the bad, and there is some bad, and then finally come up with my conclusions at the end of this. So what is this lens? This is a all-metal lens. It's a pancake design, 25mm f2 from TTArtisan. It's an interesting little lens because it is so small. The packaging is quite luxury considering the price on this. It's got a really nice presentation case that again looks like it should come from something that's a hell of a lot more expensive than what you spent on this glass. Inside the package you've got a really nicely printed specifications sheet and warranty card, and the lens sits nicely snug inside its little foam enclosure. You pull it out and it just feels like quality. This is an oddly luxurious lens considering its price. And yes, I'm going to keep on coming back to the price, unfortunately. As I say, it's all metal and it is of the design that reminiscent of a lens from the 1970s. When I say that it is reminiscent of the 1970s, there is no electronic contacts in this. There isn't even an aperture linkage for a mechanical aperture. Everything is straight manual. It means that the aperture ring itself is at the front of the lens, and it's a clicked stop aperture ring over there as well, and it has a very nice smooth with a little bit of drag focusing ring just behind that. The aperture marks and focusing marks are all painted on as opposed to being etched onto the steel itself, and it's a very nice feeling knurled knob around the focusing itself as well. It has a metal mount at the back as well, so I mean this thing is likened to basically a ice hockey puck. It feels indestructible. It is solid steel. It's nice and hefty in the hand. But when I say hefty, it's not actually that heavy. On my scale, this weighs 167 grams. To put that into context, that's a little bit lighter than the Fujifilm 14mm, which is 234 grams. So although it feels like it's kind of heavy, it's actually light. The lens, when it's mounted onto the camera, is very small. I mean, you can see over here that it doesn't extend very far from it. If I hold it, my knuckles will actually come in front of the lens itself. So not that it's going to come into the frame because of the focal length, but it does just give an indication of how small this particular lens is. Focusing is from infinity to about 25 centimeters, which again isn't super close. But again, to put it into context with my Voigtlander, this only focuses to 35 centimeters. So 25 centimeters is pretty close up, and you're not going to have any problems shooting, for instance, faces up close, or even flowers and some of the close-up world as well. But it's not a macro lens by any stretch of the imagination. The front thread on the lens itself is a 43mm thread, which is a little bit awkward, admittedly. And you can probably find adapters that will allow you to put on other filters if you ever need to put a filter onto the lens itself. The apertures themselves range from f2 to f16, and oddly they go f2, something in between, which I assume is probably f2.4, f2.8, 4, 5.6, 8, and then 16. It's like skips F11 inside there somehow, but for some reason we just don't have that, which I found a little bit odd. And then of course it is completely manual, which you probably got from the fact that it has no electronic contact. So if you're uncomfortable focusing manually with your camera, then this is not the lens for you. It is all manual focus. But having said that, with any of the modern mirrorless cameras, manual focus is no longer a chore thanks to focus peaking, and I find that it is very, very quick to be able to focus with this particular lens. And again, the size is amazing. Okay, so that's pretty much what it is. A small, all-metal, fairly lightweight pancake lens that is 25mm in focal length on an APS-C size sensor. So let's get into the good. Obviously the price. This is the reason to deter why anybody would want to actually buy this lens in the first place. $55 to $69 is dirt cheap when you come around to a real lens. I'm calling this a real lens because it has a full range of aperture stops. It has a focusing range from 25 centimeters through to infinity, and it is obviously an interchangeable lens for whichever brand camera you want to purchase it. And it's available in micro four thirds, Fujifilm X mount, and of course Sony E mount. So it is a real lens as opposed to those lenses that are actually body caps with plastic elements inside them, or no aperture, or just a fixed focus range. So yes, I consider this the cheapest real lens available out there at the moment. What you're getting though is essentially 1980s kind of tech. It is, as far as I understand, multi-coated, but that's about as far as the optical magic goes inside here. And I'm going to get into this in the bad section because there is actually a price to pay for the price tag itself. But the good is the fact that it is so small. This is fantastic for doing street photography. I love the fact that this is so small. It's almost small enough that you can get your camera, this is an X-T3 with the lens on it, into a jacket pocket. And in fact, when I put it on one of the new XE5s, it looks like it's made to be there. It's probably the closest you're going to get to an affordable kind of rangefinder experience with this particular lens coupled to that tiny body. Optically, it is pretty sharp in the center, particularly if you stop down to f5.6, which I found was its sharpest aperture. And yeah, you get a nice sharp image as a result of that. And the multi-coating does certainly help because you can see that there is some micro contrast that is kept up inside the photographs themselves. I felt confident shooting this in street. I felt confident photographing portraits with it, particularly the kind of family portraits that I'm likely to shoot with this particular camera. It was a great little walk around lens when I'm using it. It's not exactly a stellar lens. I have to put it out front right away. Although at f5.6 this is sharp, I would qualify it as sharp enough. It has a 25mm focal length, which comes out to around 37.5mm on a full frame, because that's a really common focal length, apparently. Why they didn't make it 27, I'm not entirely sure. TTArtisan do, however, have a 27mm autofocus lens, which is almost as cheap as this one, but the reviews on that are somewhat negative. It is a soft lens. This one, on the other hand, everyone who's used it has said it's sharp enough. I'm not going to say that other reviewers call it blindingly sharp. You will not cut yourself on the sharpness of this lens. It is just not that sharp, but it is sharp enough. Passable results. When I say passable, my standards are pretty high, so I want them to be pretty sharp. Again, I'm shooting this on an X-T3 though, so the results are pretty good in comparison to shooting it on an X-T5. And here you can see the results when I borrowed a friend's X-T5 and popped the TTArtisan lens onto that to photograph not so much a brick wall, but a mural. And you can see the results are sharp enough. They're decent. They're reasonable results coming from a lens like this. that 40 megapixel sensor is going to show up the flaws inside the lens itself. So although it is sharp in the center at f5.6, it's not quite as sharp as the top end glass from, for instance, Fujifilm. The closest comparison you're probably going to see in terms of the actual lens itself is the Fujifilm's 27mm f2.8 WR lens, which is an extraordinary performer. It's far, far sharper. It is also light. It's weather resistant, whereas this one is not weather resistant. It's autofocus, except the Fujifilm 27mm is almost 5 times as expensive as this particular lens. The TTArtisan's is 1,500 Rand in South Africa. The Fujifilm 27mm comes out to just around 7,500 Rand. That's massive. The difference is extraordinary. So obviously you're kind of expecting the Fujifilm to be sharper, and to all intents and purposes, certainly looking at the reviews online, it is a lot sharper from edge to edge. Okay, so but that's just the sharpness. In terms of my usage of the lens on the X-T3, it is sharp enough. It is actually fantastic. I kind of like it. And I've always been a fan of quirky lenses. So this is a quirky lens, and yeah, I'm quite happy with it in that regard. It's towards the edges of the frame that the optics kind of fall apart, unfortunately. And this kind of starts getting us into the bad of the lens itself. There's something funky happening in the corners. It looks almost like a Petzval lens when you look at the extreme corners. They're just not sharp. They kind of got the swirly out of focus area around it, and they only clean up after f8. So I'd say f8, you can still see it, and it's at f16, so right at the smallest aperture when diffraction limitation is probably at its worst. Then the corners kind of clean up. So it's almost like the lens itself is designed for a micro four thirds sensor, not a APS-C sensor. So be aware that if corners are important to you, for landscape photography in particular, this is not the lens to look at, unfortunately. So that's straight out. Having said that though, I had lots of fun using it creating panoramics in landscape photography, and as long as you're aware of the edge issue, you can get around it and create really nice sharp photographs, even of landscapes. But if you are concerned about edge-to-edge sharpness, this is just not going to show it, unfortunately. You're also going to see a little bit of vignetting coming in from the corners. It's about a stop when you start shooting, and it closes up again at around a 5.6. 5.6, it's a nice, clean image. In fact, if you're wanting the best quality, excepting the corners, which are just weird, 5.6 is pretty much where you're going to leave it. However, you have bought yourself a pancake lens with a nice wide aperture, and the reason you got that wide aperture is because you want to get nice, clean, bokeh-licious backgrounds. This sort of performs to that level. f2 is not exactly super wide open for an APS-C sensor, but it's wide enough. And certainly the out of focus highlights in the center show the results of the 7-bladed diaphragm. It's actually pretty good. Again, as you go outwards, it starts to get a little bit funky, and you can see that the bokeh in the background sort of goes from a circular shape through to a kind of squished oval shape through to an almost rounded triangular shape in the corners itself. So again, you don't buy this lens if you are wanting to get the most amazing bokeh coming out of your images. The bokeh is okay. It's not superb. But again, it's $55 to $69. It's so flipping cheap. So yeah, again, you kind of expect it to not be amazing. Chromatic aberration as well, I found was manageable. It's actually, the multi-coating on the lens obviously does do its job. It's pretty clean. The only time I ever really saw it coming out, you're shooting an almost silhouetted like subject against very dark backgrounds. Apart from that, it's very, very manageable and easy enough to get rid of in post, if that is even a concern. What you will notice though is it's got some funky flare going on inside there. Anytime you get a specular highlight inside there, like the sun, you're going to get strange little shafts of rainbowy light coming out there. There isn't the kind of sun star that you're used to when you close down your aperture. The other thing I found is that if you've got backlight coming off your subject, so for instance in this image over here, you'll see you've got very strange ghosting occurring through the specular highlights inside the frame. So this is a pity, but again, it's a quirky lens. So there you go. And more's to the point, it's weird that they don't actually include a lens hood with the lens itself. But certainly my copy didn't have a lens hood with it, which is a bit strange. You can see that when you've got side light coming in from a subject, there is a slight loss of contrast. So obviously if a hood would have probably been helpful if it had been included. So for some reason it's not included, you might have to buy one. And then therein lies the problem that you have a 43mm thread. So it's kind of hard to put the lens hood on there in the end. On that note, what I ended up doing was actually buying a 43 to 52mm thread adapter, which essentially opens up a whole bunch of filter options to me, as well as giving some slight hooding to the lens itself. So as soon as I did that, I found that the lens was infinitely more manageable in terms of adding accessories to it, but it does extend the length ever so slightly. F2 is not necessarily the widest aperture, but it is certainly usable when it comes around to low light photography. And this lens is great for photographing things like nighttime scenes, or if you're again in a dark situation and you're wanting it at F2. Focus is a little tricky, obviously, because it is manual focus. I used it quite happily as a little camera while I was filming a film production the other day at the Westville Theatre Club. So it's great. It's a nice little lens from that perspective. And if you're looking to get into photography, particularly if you're a student and you are needing a low light lens that you can just throw on your camera and is not going to break the bank to get hold of, this is great. If, on the other hand, you are comfortable with manual focus lenses, this is a gorgeous lens to use. It's really, really comfortable. I find that the size and the shape means that I can even control it with a single finger focusing the lens. You can one-hand this lens, which is fairly unique, I think. For video users, there's also some bad in the fact that it is not a declicked lens. So when you change your aperture, you're going to get the click, click, clicks. And of course, it's because of the sizing of the lens as well, it's kind of difficult to rig if you want to actually put on a focus rig or anything like that. So for video shooters, unless you're running and gunning and hand holding or hand focusing, it's probably not the lens for you either. So where does that kind of leave me with this particular lens? Do I actually recommend it or not? I mean, I've already indicated that it is not the sharpest lens out there. Yeah, it's got some really weird optical flaws, or we could call them traits, inherent in its design, but it is so cheap. When you put it against its competition, I mean, again, going back to that Fujifilm 27mm lens, which is really the closest lens to my Voigtlander that I have, that Fujifilm is more than 5 times as expensive as this lens. If you can get it on special for 7.5, it's 5.5 times as expensive. When it's on its full price, which is just under 8,000 Rand, then it is 6 times as expensive as this little lens. That's a lot of money to spend on a lens if you're wanting to just play with it. So, and that I think brings me to the crux of this. If you're looking for a lens just to mess around with, and you want a nice cheap lens and something that feels sort of indestructible, that's fun to use, gives you optically okay results, enough so that I'd be confident using the photographs from this for publication. So from that perspective, this lens is a killer deal. It's really, it's an inexpensive, optically okay lens. So it makes it very hard to not recommend it. Does it have the world's best optical quality? No, definitely not. It's got quirks, it's got traits that maybe make it second fiddle to something like Fujifilm's 27mm lens. But I can't ignore the price on this lens. At 1,500 Rand, or around somewhere between $55 to $69, it is literally 5 to 6 times cheaper than the Fujifilm 27mm lens. That's a lot of money to pay for a lens that maybe you just need something for the occasional low light usage. This lens was not sent to me. I purchased this with my own cash, so I can be as honest as I want about it. As I've already indicated, if you just need a lens that gives you a nice wide open aperture, it's small so you can pocket it practically. I mean, if you've got your other lens with you, you can literally throw this in your jeans pocket and it won't be a problem. Would I recommend it? Yes, with those caveats built into the recommendation. If you want the best optical quality though, you've got to spend the dosh and you've got to get yourself the Fujifilm, which is the Obviously, it's sharper, it's autofocus, it's weather resistant, it's lighter, it's a fantastic little lens, but it's 5 to 6 times the price of this lens. So if this is what you can afford, you're not going to go wrong with it. It is actually pretty damn good. To the point that I really enjoy shooting with it, and it actually tends to stay on my camera far more so than any of the other lenses that I've got for the Fujifilm, because I wanted a small, light, wide aperture, walk around lens that it's not going to be big and intrusive. It's not going to break the bank when I use it, and it's so cheap that if it breaks, I don't really care. And that's why this is a great lens, because for what it is, it's awesome. Just don't try and compare it to the best in class. Cool, so those are my thoughts on this particular TTArtisan. If you've enjoyed the video, please remember to pop a like and a subscribe into the blocks around the YouTube screen. If you want to see some more videos like this, please put some comments in the sections below. Have you got one of these lenses? If so, let me know your thoughts on it. How have you found it? Is it worth binning, or are you actually enjoying shooting with it? It would be interesting to see some other points of view on this little guy. Right, till then, thanks again for watching. Cheers.